Oh my goodness, what's going on? Oh well. I guess this is how we are today. This is the second jumper that I've put on this morning, and I'm already aware that it is too warm to wear the thing. And I'm sorry, just give me a second whilst I take my slippers off because my feet have grown inordinately warm. Anyway, Anyway, hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and today I am going to be talking about, I'd say nothing in particular. I'm going to be rambling, definitely. A nice old-fashioned wool gathering video, which is probably the third that I have recorded, and I'm hoping that this one actually makes it online. Most recently, I found that by the time I finish recording them and spouting forth my thoughts, I reach the end and I think, well, that was a nice form of talking therapy, but I cannot be asked going back through and listening to what I had to drone on about. So I've made a list, so I guess this time it is actually particular. So, firstly, I'm just going to mention not the elephant in the room, and, well, it's not even in the room. Let's mention the dog in the living room, or the lounge for you heathens, the sitting room. I don't know what other people call it elsewhere in the world, but for me, it's a living room, and currently there is a 11-month-old Jack Russell bounding about my house, specifically the living room, where I left it with a lot of toys and an old butter tub. Now, I don't know if anybody else knows about what it's like to have a father as a farmer, but when I was growing up, you would come home from school and, well, no, let's get rid of that pronoun for a second. When I was younger, I would come home from school and my father would have another animal in our garden. The dog isn't in the living room, it's on the stairs. So sometimes these animals of my father's would be ferrets, there were rabbits, there were chickens. I have lost count of the amount of border collies that he purchased or that he was holding on to for somebody. And so even Jack Russells as well, when I was younger, before I actually owned my own Jack Russell, my dad brought quite a few home and had them in the entry when he was using them as stud dogs for a Jack Russell we owned at the time. So we all know that, and it seems to be a lockdown thing for me. There always seems to be something leaving the last week of lockdown to do with a dog. Last June, it was the fact that my dog, Rambo, my previous Jack Russell, who was 15 years old, died. Not fun. And then after the second lockdown we had in November, I was due to, well, I was actually going to purchase one of the Blue Merle Border Collies that I was showing in my vlogs at the time. But this didn't happen. I thought that I would be spending a lot more time at work than would be necessary to help to raise this pup, really. So that's gone on. I've found the pup on Facebook. It seems to be doing incredibly well, so I'm happy about that. And anyway, to make this short story even longer, last Monday, my dad brought up this dog, this Jack Russell, and said it's 11 months old and how much it was. And I'm not going to lie, I did not feel ready for a dog of any kind. I'm writing the final Doris book. I know that I was due to go back to work last Thursday, and there's just this sensation in me saying, no, hold off. I was wary. Also, dogs at the moment are incredibly expensive, and I'm aware that money, not just for me, but for my parents is tight. So do we really want to be going and adding another canine to the situation? Yes, I'm aware that my sister's Jack Russell that we still have is on its way out, so there's that. I don't seem to have much say in the matter. I thought we'd ended it with the fact that we weren't going to be having this dog, and on Tuesday my brother delivered a Jack Russell, 11 months old, to my house. So we've called her Sally. I will admit, I still don't know how I feel about this dog. This weird little mongrel that seems to have a Chihuahua face, because there might be a chance it's crossed with a Chihuahua. Someone said it might be crossed with a Patterdale, but I'm like, no. The short legs on this thing, this stumpy little mottled. Ugh. So, first thing she does is she defecates in my living room. My father's fault. He's kept her on a lead and no one's walked around the back garden despite the fact she's had an hour-long journey, so I don't blame her. Then she wheezes on my settee. So I think, do you know what? It's probably a good idea to get her out of this house. So, not really thinking about how she needs to get settled. I think, let's just go for a walk. Let's explore. I got on the canal. And I'll be mentioning canal walks in a second as well, but I got on this canal. And we're walking. And everything's going fine. There's nobody else on the canal. And then she sees a goose. And she won't move. So I'm guessing she's never seen a goose before. I was told she's been locked in a kitchen for the last 11 months. So I was feeling particularly sorry for her anyway. But when she was scared of a goose, I was a bit like, come on. If I'm agoraphobic, you can cope with a goose. So anyway, we keep walking. And then it flaming starts snowing, doesn't it? And she freezes. I imagine she thought that she was in some sort of torture chamber. She's not only had the psychological trauma of a goose, but now it's started snowing. And I mean like proper coming down, can't see through it type stuff. There's nobody else on the canal. She probably thinks I'm going to drown her. So I quickly divert, get off the canal at the next stop. But I'm actually carrying her because she's stopped. Stock still, not moving, and I don't want to choke the poor thing. And then it's a 20-minute walk home, carrying a Jack Russell, looking like something out of a post-apocalyptic film. And that was just the first hour with her. And see, the fact of the matter is, I've not paid for this dog. So technically this is my father's dog, Sally. But I'm the one who's been getting up with her. Well, I've been getting up and she's been there. I've been letting her out. I've been taking her on walks. I've been feeding her. But both my father and my brother, the older one, are a bit the same. And they see a dog and they think pound size. They think, oh, you could breed off that. Or whatever. And I'm a bit like, well, I thought we'd gone through all this business. I thought this was all over. Are there not enough dogs in the world? Do we really need to contribute any more to that? Also, similarly, what nobody informed me of in getting a new dog. Now, I can't find the message that I've sent to people because I've basically been informing everyone. I don't even know whether we're going to be keeping this dog because that's one of the things you always had as a child. Apart from Rambo and Lucky and Floss, when you know that they're your dogs and they're staying in your house, it's different. But there's still some anxiety there and some unsurety as to whether this dog will actually even be staying here. And so it leaves you being a bit standoffish, but then you've still got to train the thing and you've still got to be kind to her. But also at the same time, they have gone and got a dog that looks very much like my dog that died a year ago. And so at the same time where you have these moments of happiness where you're like, there's a dog in my house again. I had Floss, but she beggared off a few months ago when my sister went to live with a boyfriend. But you watch this dog running around the garden and she looks exactly like your dead dog. And I won't lie to you, it brings back feelings of grief that I didn't know were there, but also some sort of guilt because it's almost as though you're replacing this thing that was part of your life for 15 years. Since that fateful journey down the canal, I then took her for a walk around the park with my mother, and still not that successful, so then I decided to employ an alternate, and my sister was staying over for the night, so I had her come on a walk with me with Floss, and this little dog seems to have developed a kinship with Floss, and they're playing, and she wants to learn how to walk properly on a lead. So I've been having my sister train the dog, but also train me into how to make this dog an all right specimen of a canine. But like I say, sister's moved out, so there aren't as many walks into the forest and that sort of thing as there were previously. I did return to work last Thursday, and I told everyone this. I was like, well, at the start of this most recent lockdown, she chose to, go and spend time with her boyfriend, the person she's in a relationship with, actually get to spend time with him, as opposed to just FaceTiming all last year. Oh. Sorry, I couldn't tell why the dog yelped. It'll either be that she's not happy that the other dog's in a bed. Anyway, so yes, went back to work, and I mentioned that my sister had moved out, and they were saying, oh, this must be like a bereavement. I was like, love my sister, don't deny that. But are you seriously telling me that you think I had nothing else in my life? I mean, it's true, but I don't see these things like that. I'm very much I'm happy for you person. I'm very much like, yes, leave the house. You're an adult. Get a life. I certainly would like one. That's it, basically. I did return to work as well, so let's talk about that. Went in on Thursday for a meeting that was only supposed to last half an hour, but we actually stayed around chatting for a bit. And then I was in Friday and Saturday, where we were trying to get the shop ready for reopening on Monday. And we kept having to be kind to ourselves, because despite the fact we were going through all of this summer stock that we'd had saved since last year, and also some donations that we've acquired over the last few months, we weren't able to get all of the rails full, and that job is still ongoing. And we had to be kinder and just say, and this is not a royal we, this is the people that were there, which was just 2 staff members and 2 volunteers, that we were trying to do the job in 2.5 days that it takes 35 people an entire week to do. But then Monday came round, and would you know it, the card machine wasn't working. We came out of, well, we're not out of a lockdown, are we? But some of the restrictions were lifted, and we opened on Monday, and the card machine wasn't working. So immediately I get onto my area manager, who says I need to ring the company who supply us with this card machine. Ring them once. It says, due to us all leaving these restrictions, have you tried this method? So I tried that. Then I rang them again because it didn't work. It took me through to another thing saying, if that hasn't worked, press 1. Press 1. It disconnected me. Did it again. Thought, well, I won't press 1 this time. I'll wait. I waited because it says you could do that. And got disconnected. So then I go onto the website and I start printing off their help pages and doing all of these different codes and everything. None of that's working. Eventually, it gets to 12 o'clock and I finally get to the point where it says, if you'd like us to ring you back, press 1. So I do that. And they ring me back half an hour later. And I was on the phone with them, both on hold and off hold, for nearly 2 hours. I got transferred to another company, and after they weren't able to fix it after 2 hours, they gave me a reference number and said they'd ring me back within 15 minutes, and they never did. So my first day back at work was spent on the phone trying to fix a card machine that then didn't end up getting fixed. And I got a phone call yesterday, because I only do 3 days a week, and then there's another shop assistant who does the other 3 days, for this reference number, because they hadn't realised what it was. And that was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I was like, for flaming it. I mean, I'll say it now, we did okay. For the first day back, for a Monday, we did incredibly well. We had a queue outside all day. People were being respectful, and it went as well as it could have done with a broken card machine. But, I don't know. I mean, to me, because I disappeared on Monday and I'm not back until Friday, I'm hoping all the kinks have been ironed out and it'll be back to much the same by the time I return on Friday. But quite honestly, I like my job to just be in the back sorting or in the back steaming, and this was none of those things. This was having to talk on a phone. I don't have the best phone manner in the world. Well, no, it's not that I don't have a good phone manner. I don't like talking on the phone to people I don't know. Like here, I can gab as much as the best person. I can gab with the best of them. I don't know. My phraseology's gone out the window with learning Italian. My phone manner then reached a point of passive aggressiveness, where this person was saying to me to tell them every single thing my machine was doing, and I was doing that, and they were asking me to repeat it again and again, and I was telling them everything that was happening and they weren't understanding it, and I was like, well, if you don't understand it, love, I don't think you can expect me to. Anyway, to return to another thing about learning Italian, I've now been learning Italian for over a year, and I keep thinking that I'm not able to speak and verbalise full sentences in Italian, and then I'm finding that I just have to gain some more confidence, because as soon as I think of a word, I'm able to get through the sentence. I think sometimes it's because in English, you have about 50,000 different ways you can formulate a sentence and as many synonyms to do so. And so when I'm trying to think of a sentence, sometimes if I rework it in my head, I'm able to say it in Italian. So that's worked out well. Another thing that has happened is that I've started speaking Italian in my dreams, which was incredibly weird the other day when I was having a conversation with Dawn French in Italian in a park and she was reading Rapunzel. It made no sense to me. And quite honestly, I've no idea what I said. Also, some words I really seem to be struggling with writing in English now, which I didn't know was going to happen. Basically, it started with the word responsible, because in Italian, it's very close to the English word responsabile. I don't mind so much because I'm really glad to be learning Italian, and it's a lot of fun for me when watching Inspector Montalbano on BBC4, or the Young Montalbano as it is at the moment, and the people are saying stuff and I'm thinking, well, I wouldn't have translated it like that. But also I'm finding that I need to actually listen to it as opposed to just reading the subtitles, because if I listen to it, then obviously that's more about gaining Italian comprehension, whereas reading the subtitles leads to some very lazy viewing, because you're just reading what's being said and being told that that's what's being said. Although I will admit, when I watched Io che solo amo te and Under the Riccione Sun, I did need the subtitles there. There was no way. Like, there were definitely some things where I thought, yes, this is great, I can understand what's being said, but without those subtitles, I don't know how I would have got on. Now, I know that I mentioned those films in the Woolgathering video I won't be sharing, so just know, whilst I drink me cup of tea. Oh, it's still hot. It's still hot! So, Io che solo amo te is a film that I wanted to see after visiting Rome in 2015 and seeing it advertised everywhere. It's a romantic comedy about this man and woman who are due to get married, but they don't know whether they are right for each other, which leads to some extra marital stuff, which I don't know, is it extra premarital? Either way, everyone in this film seemed to have a secret. There is some homosexual representation in there, which reminds me that some places in Italy there might still be the fight between religion and sexuality, but it was nice to at least see some discussion of it and to see how it was handled in the end, although there were some things said that did leave me a bit uneasy. because it felt like television 20 years ago and this is such a recent film. However, I am understanding attitudes of a different country here. Similarly, I'm not sure how I felt about how all the extramarital stuff was okay if these people were men, but it wasn't okay if they were women. I never have been one for double standards. There were some things that felt a bit iffy to me, but I'm aware that I'm bringing my own sensibilities and some English sensibilities into the viewing of an Italian film, who notably are going to have different values and different social economics than me. I don't know, I failed sociology. I never turned up to the class. And then we have Under the Riccione Sun, also known as Sotto il Sole di Riccione. And yes, I do know that because of the song by the Giornalisti, who basically did the entire soundtrack to this film. And it was fantastic because I discovered the Giornalisti last year when I was looking for Italian music to listen to. And I don't know what came first, the film or the songs. This was the film that I sent a message to my friend Charlie Brooke saying it made me realise how old I was, because this was a teen beach film and early 20s beach film, and I was just very grateful for a final line in this film where all these people who'd been meeting up on a beach, who'd never met each other before, yet they've all been coming on holiday there for years, and it's just this like I say, beach holiday film. And I was so glad for this line at the end where this person points out that just because they've had a fantastic summer together doesn't mean they're ever going to meet each other again, and doesn't mean they'll remember each other's names within a year. And I was grateful for that, because I needed that reality, because this made me feel like I'd wasted my youth. Otherwise, the films made me laugh and they were light-hearted enough. I don't know that they are the best films in the world, but after I watched Io che solo amo te, I did want to go and watch the sequel, but it's a Christmas film. From the learning of the Italian and the watching of the Italian, I do have some more Italian films that I want to watch. One, because I've seen that Emma Malone, who is she's an Italian singer who I've discovered that I quite like, is in a film that came out last year. She was also on the Italian version of The X Factor alongside Mika last year. So I did end up watching a bit of that, but me Italian wasn't good enough to figure out what was being said. What was I going to say after that? Oh yeah, so like I say, she's in a film that I want to see, and similarly, I'm just going to go through what's available on these internet viewing platforms for me to see in Italian. Since I did mention the Giornalisti and I did mention Emma, I am also going to mention that recently I haven't really been listening to a lot of music. Music was one of those things that, whilst I was going throughout March in this very insular world where I steered clear of being part of the universe for a month, I listened to a lot of music, but none of it was really new. It was all the stuff that I think you go to when you're feeling a certain type of way. But Delta Goodrem does have a new song out, and that is called Billionaire, and I watched the music video yesterday, and it's one of those things where it feels like a progression of the artist, and I don't think you see that all the time. I think sometimes you can notice when maybe the work isn't their best, but it's still enjoyable, if that makes sense. But this felt like it was more, it feels better, it feels like a progression, and there's something about it that felt a bit nostalgic, but also a bit like an Australian version of country music. I don't know. I liked it. Since I did just reference something that I wasn't going to reference because it was in the previous video where I talked about being sad and then we got rid of it. So basically, yes, in March I disappeared for about the entirety of the month. I uploaded a video on the Friday to go out on the Tuesday, and then that weekend I fell into something of a pit of sadness. In fact, all I can say is that it wasn't necessarily a sadness, it was a case of me doing what I have to do, which is when I'm feeling any sort of way, and for whatever reason I was feeling particular stress and pressure, I don't really want to communicate that. I don't want to put that out into the world. I like to disappear into myself, figure out what's going on, and then return to the world when I'm feeling better. This was a case of similar to 2016 when I disappeared for 3 months from YouTube after only being here for about 3 anyway. I decided to focus on reading. I threw out any sort of idea about creating because I did like a week of videos just to see how I felt, and I felt like everything was very derivative and everything was very lackluster, and just it was there, it existed, but it wasn't necessarily good. It's not, none of those videos are videos to remember in future. And also, I wasn't quite aware of where this sadness was coming from, but I knew that I just wanted to read. I wanted to disappear into a corner. So what I started doing was I started waking up early, and I'd go downstairs once everyone had left for work. So it could be 7, it could be 7:15. And I'd just go and I'd sit in a corner and I'd just read for an hour and a half. And then start the day with the washing up and the drinking, you know, like going for walks and stuff. And I did do a few canal walks. One in particular was that Tuesday I'm talking about, after I'd just done 4 days of reading and locking myself away. I asked my dad to drop me off on one of the entries to the canal that's on the way to his field. And I knew it would be about an hour and a half walk back. And so I walked, and then I realised I was going to come past my old school, my primary school, which hasn't changed in the 20 years since I was there, which was a weird revelation to have, that it has been nearly 20 years since I was last there. And I walked past there, went up the road, and then get back on the canal because the towpath was closed. And I arrived back to where I have to get off the canal to come home, but it hadn't been long enough for me. So I continued. I found a nature reserve that I'd been meaning to go to for a year or so. And I walked around there in mud that was coming up to my thigh, because they like to leave it boggy for the wildlife. And that bit was where I thought, have I died and ended up in purgatory, because I got lost that many times trying to find my way out that I just ended up walking back on myself. And then this thing of just getting up, reading, walking down the canal and coming home became the sort of therapy, if you will, the way that I was slowly kind of gathering all of the pieces of myself, which sounds very melodramatic, but it's how it felt at the time. And I wasn't necessarily even... No, I know that I wasn't. I stayed clear of BookTube because it felt like pressure. It was a case of I was seeing really good content, and there was just some block there where I couldn't figure out how to comment. But also, watching all of these people create really good content was making me feel somewhat envious or jealous, and I didn't want that energy. I wanted to stay clear of that. I wanted to say goodbye to that. So I disappeared from BookTube. I wasn't watching videos on here. The only person, and to mention her again, I've mentioned her a lot because Charlie's the only person I've basically spoken to. Charlie and Emily of Novel Novels are 2 of the only people I've spoken to in the last month. And with Charlie, it was just a case of Drag Race would be on. We'd have our usual chat about Drag Race, and then I'd disappear again. But it was necessary. And I wasn't watching television. I didn't want anything. I didn't want any of the world to interfere with what was going on with me, because I was like, it's incredibly selfish, I know, and I was incredibly privileged to be able to be in this position. Even though I'm aware of the privilege that I've got in being able to disappear from the world for so long, it was one of those things, it was like the double-edged sword, really. It was this case of feeling guilty about disappearing, recognizing that for me, I needed to disappear. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, because I'm not apologetic about the fact that I took the time out to I'm not apologetic that I took the time out to make myself better, but I am apologetic for everything I missed out on by being absent from the world for basically a month. And even when I created those videos last week, my wrap up for March and for the BookTube prize, that was very much a case of some people very kindly got in touch to check how I was. And I have, as I've said, don't like to try and talk these things out with people. I just get on with things, become insular, and then return miraculously once I figured everything out. And so I made those 2 videos while still feeling particularly sad, and choosing to make the decision to really just try and talk about the books as opposed to say anything with regards to life or anything going on outside of the BookTube sphere or outside of talking about books. I didn't want any of that to interfere. So now we've got through that sadness. My Christ, all the electric in my house has just gone. That's a sign. We don't do signs, but if there was one, there it is. I'm going to continue this video because I don't have much left to talk about, but I'm going to apologise for the lack of light now. If I open a curtain, how does that go? Let's try natural light again. Ugh. I don't think that natural light actually helps, does it? And you can see how filthy my windows are, but this is my fault for going on for 40 minutes. This is great, isn't it? We've had dogs that need to blow my nose and the electric going. This is the problem with going off, with being on a meter, but I will also just point out that we're poor. I keep telling you that I'm poor. Can't claim and afford electrics anymore. Anyway, I'm better now. I needed the time, and I am appreciative of the people who did contact me to check how I was, and I apologise if any of you worried about that. But I'm fine now. So, last month you will have seen that I read quite a lot. This month we are now on the 14th of April and I've yet to finish a book. I am buddy reading The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt with Emily of Novelle Novels, and I read this when I first started my channel back in 2015. I was going to unhaul it because of reasons that I will get to when I review it, but it's interesting to go back and read this with Emily and also recognise that it's not as slow as I remember it being. But again, this was one of the first adult novels that I was reading. I was 23, but I was still reading a lot of young adult literature at the time. But it was only then, at the end of 2015, start of 2016, I started to transition into reading more adult works. And I'm also reading The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. I am now 700 pages into this 900 something page book. I'm reading it on my phone and my Kindle because I found that my library app had it. But blooming heck, every time I think that I've read a lot and then I find out that I've still got so far to go. It's a weird one. I know that if I was reading it physically, I'd be reading it a lot faster, because there's this thing in my head that when I'm reading a physical book, it feels like something I ought to be doing. But when I'm looking at my phone, it feels like I am I don't know, it feels very much like spending too much time on your phone looking at a screen, and it's a weird one there. But yeah, those two books have really slowed things down for me in terms of reading, but I am hoping to finish The Mirror and the Light by the end of this week. We're still only reading 30 pages a day of the Goldfinch, so I'm hoping that then I'll be able to move into more of Mantel's work that I have, which was Fludd, Every Day is Mother's Day, and that book sequel. And then I've got some books that I meant to read last month. But honestly, I just read whatever I want to read, and I think that last month really taught me to try and like I there's a book called I don't know whether I'll put out there yet, but in reading a lot of Hilary Mantel last month, I recognised that I wanted to focus on reading an entire writer's entire works before moving on, if I enjoyed that writer. So with Hilary Mantel, I found a writer that I enjoyed reading, so I want to continue to read this writer's work and not leave it like I have done with so many other authors. Another author I chose at the time was Larry McMurtry, who unfortunately died last month. But this here is Streets of Laredo, which is the sequel to Lonesome Dove, and I had plans to read this in April, so we'll see how I get on. There's still time, there's still 17 days, so once I've finished The Mirror and the Light and some BookTube prize books, then I'm hoping that I can still get that in there. But I'm honestly trying to avoid putting pressure on myself this close to just being incredibly overwhelmed and feeling unseasonably sad. Or seasonably sad. Maybe I'm just a naturally sad person. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's just the way that I live my life, and maybe that's not healthy. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not healthy to be an incredibly grumpy northerner all the time, but I've made a career of it now. And then finally, one thing that I want to talk about is my writing. I finished the chapter. The chapter that has taken me nearly 2 months to write is the longest chapter I have ever written. Honestly, it's actually the length of a novella. It's long. And I don't know. I've stopped thinking of the final Doris book as a novel. At first, I wondered, is it 3 separate novellas to make up a story as a whole? I don't know. I've never really written a novel. So this is I've always said that the Doris books are collections of monologues, and then we have Alice Valentine, so maybe that's a novel. I don't know, but I feel like I've never really gone into structure so well. And this is very unstructured. But this last chapter felt so necessary, and it was incredibly emotional to write. It was a bit emotionally draining, and I was drawing on my own sadness at the time in order to get this chapter written. And I'm imagining that when you read it, you'll still be able to notice when this chapter was written. But I did end up with another problem in that all these years of writing, and I just had this final few chapters in my head of what's going to happen. I know the next 3 chapters and how this book ends, and I've known for years. I didn't realise I'd never actually planned it out point by point, which is the way I work. I write a sentence, then I write another sentence, then I write another sentence, and then they become scenes. And that's not happened. And all these years, so I've reached a point where now I have to plan the final 3 chapters and how things are going to work. But thinking of this, I've hopes to finish this book by summer. Ideally, I'd got this book in my head as coming out this summer, but that's not going to happen. And again, there's no pressure to do so. Once it's been edited, we'll see how I feel about releasing it. But whilst I was doing all of this reading, and it was the Victoria Wood book here that inspired what I'm going to write next. It won't be the next Alice book after Doris. I need this time away to write a standalone, definitely. However, I have decided that even though I'm going to take the time away to write the standalone, I don't think the standalone book will be the next book published after Royally Doris. So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm going to continue to have this chaotic publishing schedule that means that as an indie author, I'm prone to failure. And I'm okay with that because, as we all know, I'm already a disappointment. Anyway, I think that is me done for today. We've had enough signs that I should beggar off now. So, all I'm going to say is that if you want to talk about anything I have discussed today, then please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.